What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. I'm John Hoover. He's Parker Thune. And if you're new here, that's okay. This is our very first podcast for Sports Illustrated's OU affiliate, SI Sooners, allsooners.com. This isn't like our first podcast. A lot of you guys probably know I hosted an OU podcast last fall for the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Sooners. And a lot of you probably also know that I used to co-host a Sooner podcast, Inside OU, for the franchise. But you know what? All the contracts have expired. The mandatory 6-month no-compete periods have ended, and I am back. I am podcasting. Let's go. Listen, if you're on with us today, that means you're basically in on the ground floor, people, of what we are calling the next great Oklahoma Sooner podcast. And what does that mean? Well, I think there's a lot of great Sooner podcasts out there, but I'm pretty sure we're the only one with Sports Illustrated by our name. Right, Parker?
Yeah, that's correct, John. Really excited to get this underway. There's obviously plenty to talk about. We got a whole summer's worth of content to catch up on, so let's dive right in.
Absolutely. And if you're joining me on the YouTube channel, what's up, folks? Boy, that hand looked giant when I did that. I stuck it right in front of the camera. Looked like Andre the Giant hand. Hope everything is going well. Appreciate you guys on YouTube as well. You guys are the lifeblood of the video Hoover that everybody loves so much, right? Okay, maybe not. I embellish that last part. But if you find our podcasts, I think you can find them, Parker. This is, like I said, this is brand new. We're on the ground floor. We're just getting started. This is not going to be amateur hour. Trust me on that. But you can find them basically wherever you find your podcasts. iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. We're on all the platforms. And you know what is beautiful about podcasts? If you need to pause and finish later for whatever reason, you can't find it on your podcast network or your podcast provider, just go to our website, sisooners.com. We'll have every episode embedded right there on the front page of an easy-to-play embedded player. It's SI Sooners, and sisooners.com is where you're going to find all of our new stories, videos on the Sooners. I mean, guys, I'm not kidding, like a minimum of 3 new pieces of content every day, morning, noon, and night. We've got you taken care of. I'm the publisher. I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm the publisher. Parker is the deputy editor. And let me tell you something. If you're into OU recruiting, I know a lot of you are, then Parker has got you covered. Unbelievably fresh takes and outlooks and perspectives on the OU recruiting scene. SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Parker, what's the latest? I just reposted some stuff that you threw up there not an hour ago.
Yeah, that's right, John, and we should just go ahead and start there because it's really fresh and really compelling. Check it out over on SI Sooners, allsooners.com. But I got the chance yesterday to speak with Damon Harmon and Kelvin Gilliam, 2 guys that are actually high school teammates out at Highland Springs High School in Virginia, in that DMV area, really competitive geographical region for prep football. And both these guys are being recruited by the Sooners. Gilliam, a 4-star defensive end, Harmon, a 3-star defensive back, and both, it would appear for the moment, leaning towards attending Oklahoma. Many of their top schools are the exact same. Their lists look very similar. And what's really cool, John, and what I explored in my latest piece on allsooners.com is the bond that they share beyond the football field. They've been best friends since 5th grade. And are just really both very much, neither of them are taking for granted what they've accomplished side by side, and the fact that both of them are now in a position to be recruited by these high-end FBS schools, not the least of which is Oklahoma. So give that a read. These are 2 absolutely phenomenal kids, not just great football players and impact players on the defensive side of the football that would be a perfect fit in Alex Grinch's scheme, but they are phenomenal guys off the field, great character. They love one another, and they're committed not just to finding the right school for them in a football sense, but in an academic sense as well, because both of them have acknowledged and realized that they've got a life to live after football, and I think that's something that takes a lot of maturity to acknowledge as a high schooler. You know, you have these top-end FBS programs coming after you, and it's real easy to get caught up in that. But they call it a 40-year decision rather than a 4-year decision. A 40-year decision where they go to college, because it's setting them up not just for their future career in football at the collegiate and potentially professional level, but the rest of their lives as well via their education.
Absolutely. Parker, I've read the story. It's a tremendous story. Well done. It's one of the longer recruiting pieces that you've written. So, and we posted it again. I think it posted at noon here on Friday. We're recording this podcast on Friday little afternoon. So, we're gonna get this podcast posted, and then as soon as you hear this, you need to go to sisooners.com. That is 2 different words, by the way. We call it SI Sooners, but the web address that they prefer everybody use is allsooners.com. You can get there by using sisooners.com. You can also go to the SI page and click on college football, all that kind of stuff. It's all there. We got a lot to get to because this is our first show, and there's news happening. This morning when I woke up at 7 o'clock, there was news happening. We're going to try to fit our podcasts into about a 30 to 45 minute window every show. I think we can do that. And like I said, especially today, we got a lot to talk about. Parker, let's give the people what they want. Exactly who are you?
That's the $1 million question, John, now isn't it? Well, I guess from a biographical perspective, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, the son of 2 University of Oklahoma alumni, so grew up following the Sooners, covering the Sooners, got started in sports media at age 14 in radio up in the Omaha area. And came 14 people. Yeah.
He's been doing this professionally since 14. I started at 17. I thought I was young.
That was something I don't like to think back on those early years very much, John. That was quite a time of development, to be certain. But came down here to Oklahoma for school in 2017 with the intention of pursuing broadcast journalism at the University of Oklahoma. As it stands today, I'm a semester away from getting that degree, so provided that coronavirus doesn't throw any more wrenches into the scenario, I'll be walking the stage in December with a degree in broadcast journalism and a minor in sports management. Really heavily involved in Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communication at OU, and their programs therein, specifically the television end of things, Sooner Sports Pad, Game Day U, OU Nightly. I helped to run point on all of those productions and head up the football and baseball coverage for Gaylord College, as well as the beat director for both of those sports, in addition to my work at SI Sooners. So really, Oklahoma sports is it's what my entire life is wrapped up in at this point, John.
The kid is busy, and he is eaten up with sports journalism. You guys probably already know everything there is to know about me. I've been around for like 1.5 million years. I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska, grew up in North Pole. Yes, I'm serious. North Pole, Alaska. I think I'm like the 2nd or 3rd most famous alumni of my school. There's an NFL player, and then there's I can't remember, like a politician or something. And then there's me, your humble publisher. I'm kidding, of course. But I went to high school in Ada, Oklahoma. Do not ask me how that happened, going from 9th grade first semester in North Pole to 9th grade second semester in ADA, OK, Pontotoc County. Represent! No idea. It just happened. I played high school football for the Cougs, started at the local paper the day after I graduated high school, got my journalism degree from East Central University. Been writing about sports full-time since 1985. So yeah, like 100 years, like I said. I worked at the Tulsa World for 24 years, and from 2004 to 2016, I covered basically every OU game, road and home. Was the lead sports columnist for the World for 4 years. I got out of newspapers in 2016, got into radio, and that's when I started this YouTube thing that you people are watching over there. I covered, after getting out of radio, in March, I got this gig right here covering OU sports for Sports Illustrated. And I'm telling you, I love it. When I was in high school writing for the school newspaper, the Cougar Call, I was the sports editor for 2 years. One of my friends actually signed my yearbook. I know you'll be writing for Sports Illustrated someday, Hoover. And I'm like, Yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, it took 35 years, but here I am writing for Sports Illustrated. Also, you guys need to check out my YouTube channel. It's growing bigger and bigger every day. More and more subscribers, more and more video views. I try to cut one video a week and more when there's lots of stuff going on. But check that out on YouTube. Just search for John Hoover. Tons of OU stuff on there as well. Parker, let's dive into this thing. Start with today's news. Joe Castiglione told Toby Rowland on the ref this morning, a little segment that we on SI Sooners call T-Row and Joe. We have the audio posted with a slideshow of Joe C. But Joe C said this morning that he was actually, quote unquote, surprised by what I have called the Big Ten's rogue announcement yesterday, that the Big Ten would not be playing non-con games. If you want to read the whole story, it's sisooners.com. Listen, if you're driving or making pasta or whatever and you don't have the ability to stare at your phone for 5 minutes, you know the real drill. Do not drive while looking at your phone, people. I do not condone that whatsoever. But if you just want to listen to the whole interview, we got that too. It's at sisooners.com. Click on the story, look for the link, but don't do it while driving. Parker, what did you think of Joe's comments that he, and not that he was speaking for everybody else, but I think it's implied that he and everyone else were caught off guard by the Big Ten's decision? And what did you think of the Big Ten's decision?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head, John. It seemed like a rogue announcement. I mean, it really came out of nowhere. And Joe Castiglione, it seems, and a lot of other athletic directors and conference commissioners across the country were under the impression that the Power 5 conferences, at the very least, and potentially all the conferences within the FBS level of play in the NCAA, were going to come to an agreement on how to proceed and kind of come to terms on what it was going to look like from a very, very wide-ranging perspective, and get everybody involved and make sure everybody was on the same page and ensure that whatever was happening, whatever was going to happen, however the season was going to be affected by the coronavirus, that it was going to affect everybody as equally as possible across the board. And then here you have the Big Ten just going essentially unilaterally and saying, okay, well, we're not going to play non-conference games in 2020. And that's really thrown a wrench in a lot of things. I mean, you look at some of these non-conference matchups that the Big Ten is scheduled to play, and you're looking at big schools from other Power 5 conferences that are now without a really, really big date early in the year against an elite Big Ten opponent. So I don't know, John. I don't know how this is going to affect everybody by the time it's all said and done, but it really caught me by surprise. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, and it's certainly going to be interesting to see how the rest of the conferences react across the board, to see if they follow suit out of compulsion, or if we're just going to see utter chaos across college football this year. You got some teams playing 9 games, some teams playing 11, some teams playing 13. It's really going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, and I don't think anybody's sure what's coming at this point.
Yeah, and the question I would have immediately is, what about the SEC, where they've got 8 conference games? The Pac-12, the Big Ten have said they're gonna do away with non-conference and only play conference games. That's 9 conference games for the Pac-12, 9 for the Big 12. So you have it. Even if you just go to conference only, everybody's going to have different looking schedules. In the Big 10, in the Big 12 now, the only Big 12 game against a Big 10 opponent is Iowa State, and I'm a little surprised that Iowa is not saying, we're going to keep this Iowa State game because they're like an hour and whatever minutes away. We trust their testing procedures. This is a big rivalry game. I'm a little surprised to see. I guess, and there's still plenty of time for this to happen. Iowa come out and say, yeah, we're canceling all of our non-conference games except for Iowa State. That could be something that gets a little interesting. The Pac-12, reports are that the Pac-12 has said we're also going to cancel our games, or we're going to examine it. The ACC, same thing. Now you're getting into West Virginia scheduling. West Virginia's got 2 ACC teams scheduled. Oklahoma State obviously has got a Pac-12 team scheduled. Who's playing USC? Is that Ohio State? No, I can't remember. I don't have the national schedule in front of me, but you're talking about national implications. And we had a story on this, by the way, last night sisooners.com, how the Big Ten's decision could affect OU and the rest of the Big 12. The story itself just blew up. So go on there, sisooners.com, scroll around, you'll find it, how it affects the Big 12 and Oklahoma's schedule, how it could. Parker, do you think the Big 12 will follow up? Do you think the SEC will follow up? Basically, what I'm asking is, do you think we're going to have Tennessee at Oklahoma on September 12th?
Well, it's tough to say, John, and I think what makes it really, really difficult is there's by no means a blanket solution across the board for anyone involved. Because, I mean, take a look at the Big 12. On the large scale, you have a very regionalized conference. You got teams from Oklahoma, from Texas, from Kansas, but then you got West Virginia all the way out there, and obviously they're going to be traveling a lot more than any of those other teams in the Big 12, regardless of what the decision is from the conference as far as whether they're going to play the non-conference games or what that's going to look like. But I think one thing to keep in mind here is the fact that there are teams like that, regional outliers like West Virginia. You think about Rutgers in the Big 10 as a perfect example. How some of these teams are going to have to do a whole lot of traveling for conference play, regardless of the path that their conference takes to try and deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so for the Big 12, that's one thing that you really have to keep in mind. Just because West Virginia is so far out of the way, that's the one school that's going to be affected more than any other, because one way or another, they're going to end up doing a lot more traveling than any of those teams that are located in Kansas or Oklahoma or Iowa or Texas. And so I think Bob Bowlesby and the athletic directors within the Big 12 have a lot of thinking to do, just as far as what the limits are on what the games that they're going to try to play and whether those are budgetary limits or regional limits. Because you think about it, you talked about that Oklahoma-Tennessee game on September the 12th. Tennessee is coming from further away than West Virginia would be, or they're coming from further away than Oklahoma would be traveling to West Virginia. And so I think it's just, there's so many factors at play here, John, and there's no, like I said, there's no blanket solution. And so at this point in time, I think you really have to be questioning, just because the easiest thing to do is to do away with the non-conference schedule just for the sake of simplicity. I think right now you really have to be questioning whether that Sooners-Volunteers game on the 12th is going to be happening. And right now, I would have to say the odds are that it doesn't, just based on what we've seen transpired over the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I probably agree with what you're saying. And I think the same goes for the Army game. I think that's an absolute wash. And it's a little bit of a, I'm not going to say tragedy. It's not a tragedy, but it's a damn shame that we can't go to West Point this year. Man, I've been looking forward to that. That thing's been on the schedule for like 9 years. And I jog or walk my dog every night through the neighborhood. And I try to pick a different street, but occasionally I'll traipse by the same house down by the elementary school in my neighborhood. And there's some folks that sit out in their driveway every night, chilling out, listening to the radio, doing whatever. And they know me. They follow us on SI Sooners. They love your stuff, on recruiting especially. And they ask me inevitably, almost without fail, hey, what's going on? You think we're going to get – we've got tickets to the Army game. Are we going to be able to go? And I'm like, bro, I don't know. Joe C. doesn't know. Speaking of Joe C., you mentioned Bob Bowlesby. Bob Bowlesby came out last night, issued a statement, and said, we're mid-July, we're going ahead with our 12-game schedules. Good for him, first of all. I'm not sure how realistic it is, but good for him for saying that. But in terms of Joe C., here's how optimistic Oklahoma's being about this whole thing. The Oklahoma, and I don't know if you saw this, Barry Trammell ran a story this morning quoting Joe C., and it turns out that OU is trying to move its season opener. Okay, not Army, not Tennessee. They're trying to move the season opener against Missouri State to August 29th. That way, if they have more positive tests, they'll have a little more time to deal with quarantines, players, groups of players sitting out. For now, we saw it on Wednesday. OU revealed its second round of testing data. 0 new positives, 0. Which is, I have a friend from college who was really stinking good at math, and I checked with him. Turns out 0's as low as you can go with this thing, people. It's mathematically proven. It's science. You can't get lower than 0 positive tests. So OU's doing something right. And I think OU has reason to be optimistic that not only is football going to happen, not only are they going to play the full schedule, not only will they play on time, but they're trying to move the thing up a week if the NCAA will let them, Parker.
Yeah, that's interesting to me, John, because I haven't heard any more from Missouri State's end as it pertains to that game since their athletic director announced that he wasn't budgeting to play it. And so I'm curious to see what the conversations are between Joe Castiglione and the Missouri State athletic department to try and make that happen, because obviously it's a conversation between those two. It's a conversation with the NCAA to go ahead and get the okay to do that. But there are so many moving parts, I think, for a game that the Bears athletic department has already stated that they're not planning on playing. And so, I mean, we're getting close to crunch time here, John. That game's 7 weeks away. So whatever the resolution is there, it's going to have to come quickly.
Absolutely. We're going to try to stick to a schedule on this podcast. You know, we'll hit the long segments and we'll go with them. We'll just roll with it like we just did. But we're also going to do some short stuff. So let's take a break right now. We're going to break the pod into 3 segments. Oh, you know what? In my podcasting school, I was told, don't tell them you're going away. Don't tell them you're taking a break. Don't give the readers or the listeners reason to click off or fast forward. So what we're going to do is not when we get back, because that tells you that we're taking a break. Here's the deal. Fact is, we're going to sell these breaks as commercial spots. So if you want to skip ahead, that's on you. Don't do it. Help us out. You're listening on the ground floor, so stick with us. SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day. And the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. At SI Sooners, we cover all OU sports, from football, basketball, and baseball to all the Olympic sports, as well as any big news that comes out of the OU athletic department or from around the Big 12 Conference. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners. You just heard the Twitter handle for SI Sooners. It is at all_Sooners. Well, mine is at John E. Hoover, and Parker's is at Parker Thune. Thune, Parker Thune. You need to get with that, because I'm just telling you, it's the quickest way to get your news and updates on OU sports. At John E. Hoover, at Parker Thune on Twitter. I'm also on Facebook. Of course I am, because I'm old. I'm on Instagram, and I never use it. Of course I don't, because I'm old. I'm sure Parker's on Instagram and, channel my Bill Belichick here, some Snapface and MySpace, and he's probably on Pinterest. Don't look for him on Tinder, though. Do not look for Parker Thune on Tinder. That's my advice to you. Parker, I joked about it.
Not available there, John.
Available. Yeah. He's not available.
At Parker Thune on Instagram as well, if you want to give me a follow there. It's about, that and Twitter are about the only social media platforms I put any effort into, John.
What about your MySpace page?
Oh, MySpace? That whole era must have just passed me right on by, because I have never been on MySpace.
I haven't either. And yes, we were one of those people that when we started our Facebook page in like 2009 was our Facebook handle was Hoover Family. So all of us could post. And I was the only one that did. And it was a picture of my dog. So, times change, people change, but old sports writers never do. Parker, I look back, I joked about it earlier, but really let's give the people what they want. For real, it's recruiting. Anytime OU recruiting news breaks, it seems, this is no joke, we have our biggest days ever. And I'm not even kidding. Last week, a week ago tomorrow, actually, as we record this podcast, we literally had 3 of our 4 biggest days since we took over Sports Illustrated back in March. Caleb Williams committed to OU on July 4th. That was last Saturday. Happy Independence Day, Lincoln Riley, right? Shot off some fireworks. This came a few days after winning the Elite 11 MVP, which I thought that was kind of a done deal anyway. Parker, you were in Nashville for the Elite 11. Tell me what you saw from Caleb Williams. And you know what? Let's just rain on everybody's parade a little bit. And tell me what areas you think he's going to need to work on when he gets to Norman.
Yeah, John, well, he's obviously a very, very well-rounded quarterback. If you watch the tape, the thing that's most impressive is his ability to make throws while off balance, while running. Not having his feet set doesn't faze him, which is a quality, if you pay attention to the NFL, that Patrick Mahomes has made very, very lucrative recently.
Nice.
And so I think not only does it enhance his ability to make plays down the field when the play breaks down, but it also makes defensive coordinators, it renders them lost at sea, because there's only so much you can do to contain a guy when you can't fluster him. And Caleb Williams really doesn't get flustered. Now, in watching him, and especially his pro day script at the Elite 11, I think the most glaring weakness he has is his ability to throw to his weak side, that left side of the field. He's not as sharp going to his weak side as he is to his arm side. He missed a few throws high, missed a few throws wide, and that's an area in which he's going to need to improve before he gets to Oklahoma. And obviously he's got a whole nother prep season to make that happen. In terms of the athleticism, it's obviously there. He runs a 4.640. The arm talent is off the charts, John, let me tell you. And I think the most impressive thing is he doesn't have to try and be a gunslinger. It's so easy the way the ball comes out of his hand, such a tight spiral, such great spin, and great accuracy for the most part. But I think the one area that he needs to improve on is being able to throw to that left side of the field confidently before he's ready to take the reins at Oklahoma. Look, at this point in time, I don't question at all that Caleb Williams could come in as a true freshman and contend for a Heisman Trophy as the quarterback at Oklahoma. But he's very much a work in progress. He's not a finished product. He's not going to be a finished product for quite a ways down the road, but I think that's one of the areas in which Lincoln Riley has shown he's especially adept as a coach in helping his quarterbacks develop and sharpen their skills. And I think what we're all presuming will be a redshirt year for Caleb Williams in 2021, to take that opportunity to learn under Lincoln Riley and absorb knowledge, absorb the ways in which he can better himself as a quarterback and refine his game, and also to observe Spencer Rattler, a guy who's very similar to him in terms of his skill set. I think that's going to be really, really good for Caleb Williams in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. Now, there were 20 quarterbacks in Nashville, Parker, and you saw all 20 of them, including our old buddy Brock Vandegrift, the 5-star from Georgia who was committed to OU last fall, but then decommitted on January 1st. Happy New Year, Lincoln Riley, right? Seems these things happen only on holidays. But he eventually commits to Georgia. So, Parker, in your expert opinion, Lincoln got his second choice, apparently, in Caleb Williams. But really, from the sounds of it, from the looks of it, from everything I've seen, from the work that Caleb Williams put in over the past year, Caleb looks like the better prospect. So what do you think about Vandegrift, and does OU now have the right guy committed?
Yeah, in watching Vandegrift at the Elite 11, I was speaking with John Garcia, Sports Illustrated's director of recruiting, who was also attending the event with his SI All-American crew. And we were talking about the way that Vandegrift was throwing the ball, especially on night one, which was primarily drills, and then his pro day script the following day. I think what we both observed in Vandegrift is some stiffness in the upper body that hasn't really been there historically, and it seems as though he almost has a bit of a mechanical hitch, and it's tough to identify exactly what it is, but he just doesn't seem like he has the same fluidity that he did in years past, in his freshman, sophomore, and junior years of action on the prep circuit. It's not as fluid out of Brock Vandegrift's hand. His body mechanics, his motion is just not quite as smooth as it used to be. And I don't know whether that's going to be a lingering issue. It really reared its head on day one, but by day three, when the quarterbacks went through the accuracy gauntlet, Vandegrift had really overcome whatever issues were present there and demolished the field in that competition with a time of 1 minute and 43 seconds, which was far faster than anybody else. Carlos Del Rio, the Florida commit, ran him second place at 2:11. So Brock Vandegrift is a tremendously gifted quarterback. He's got a huge arm. Really the only guy in terms of arm talent, I think, in this 2021 class that can rival Caleb Williams. But again, I come back to the athleticism and the ability to make plays off script. I think that's what sets Caleb Williams apart from Brock Vandegrift. And I don't believe he might, if you look at it, he might have been Lincoln Riley's second choice just based on the fact that Vandegrift committed previously before OU was seriously pursuing Williams. And so in that capacity, they really only turned on their recruitment of Williams after Vandegrift decommitted. But I don't believe that anybody at this point would rather have Brock Vandegrift than Caleb Williams. I think the tape bears that out. I think the performance at the Elite 11 on the whole bears that out. And I think just the evaluation of both these quarterbacks side by side, for anybody that's watched them both in person, I think it's very obvious that Caleb Williams has the higher ceiling at the collegiate level.
We might give Kirby Smart the benefit of the doubt there and say he wants him more, but I think you're probably right. A couple of more recruiting topics I want to get to before we dive into our next segment. OU's recruiting class looks like it's starting to take shape pretty nicely. A month ago, I think the Sooners team ranking was way down in the mid-40s, like 48. Was it in the 50s?
It was never quite that low, John, but you're right. It was stuck in that 40s range.
Yeah, mid 40s. So now I guess depending on which recruiting service you follow, and when I say that, you're going to have a new one to follow here in a few days, tease. Depending on who you follow, you're going to find OU's team ranking somewhere right now around 13, 14, 15, which is pretty amazing. It's a big jump up. Parker, you're the Cruton guy for SI Sooners, and I certainly appreciate how much you've poured yourself into the job. How did OU make up so much ground so fast? Who were the seismic players, besides Caleb Williams, obviously? Who were the seismic players among the 11 that they've gotten commits from that helped them make that jump?
Well, you mentioned Caleb is the obvious top-of-the-list guy right there. I mean, he's the third highest-rated recruit that Oklahoma's ever brought in, behind only Adrian Peterson and Rhett Bomar. So, I mean, in terms of a guy that made a splash to really elevate a recruiting class, it's Caleb Williams, and I think that's pretty obvious to anybody that's been tracking Oklahoma and their recruiting class over the last few months. But it certainly wasn't just Caleb that made that difference. Obviously, you've got a couple of long-time standing commits in Cody Jackson and Ethan Downs. Colin Montgomery as well was an early commit. Jordan Mukes committed back in March. But what I've really been impressed with, John, is Jamar Cain and the impact that he's made in recruiting for the Sooners in the 6 months that he's been on the job. Not even 6 months, really. Yeah. He joined the staff at the very end of January. But you look at this class of rushers that the Sooners are bringing in this 2021 circuit. You've gotten Clayton Smith, a 4-star out of Texarkana, 6'4", 220. Nathan Rollins-Kabongi, who committed back in June, 6'7", 240 out of Portland, a guy that's only played 1 year of organized football, if you can believe that. He's a basketball guy and has been his entire life. Went ahead and gave football a try as a junior in high school and immediately became one of the highest regarded prospects in the Pacific Northwest in football. And you add Ethan Downs, the in-state guy, the Weatherford native, 6'4", 240, second highest ranked recruit in the state of Oklahoma in this 2021 class. You've got three very, very high-ceiling defensive commits with the ability to rush the passer, drop into coverage, do whatever they need to do to contribute to Oklahoma's pass rush and pass defense. And I think that's one of the things that Alex Grinch and Jamar Cain have really excelled at, is recruiting versatility thus far among their 2021 commits. And I think you're going to continue to see that. They're making a push for Scooby Williams, another 4-star defensive end out of Birmingham. And then obviously we already talked about Kelvin Gilliam out of Highland Springs, Virginia, another 4-star defensive end. Like, where does it stop? Honestly, you've got so many guys that Oklahoma is leading the pack for.
In one class, that's 5 guys who will play either defensive end or outside linebacker, or possibly slide in and play that hybrid defensive tackle spot. So, yeah, that's phenomenal recruiting by the new guy, Jamar Cain, who's got some West Coast roots. So you're seeing a little bit of that play out. So, Parker, who's next? Which future Sooners are going to cast their lot with Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch and company over the next few months? And really, kind of, who's up first? Not asking you to steal any kids' thunder or anything like that, because you have been on the cutting edge of reporting these commitments when they happen. But who do you project? Who do you predict is going to be next?
Yeah, well, Damon Harmon makes his decision on August the 1st. He would be the Sooners' third defensive back commit in the 2021 class if they got him. They've obviously already snagged Latrell McCutcheon and Jordan Mukes. That's the other area beyond pass rush that Grinch has made an emphasis in recruiting, is those long, lengthy, rangy defensive backs that can really help change the culture in the Sooner secondary. Because the secondary, if you really think about it, John, has been the biggest bugaboo for the Sooners over the last few years. And I was talking to Damon Harmon about it yesterday. He said, look, Oklahoma just needs a couple really talented guys on the back end, and they're going to be winning national championships. That's his evaluation of the situation on the defensive side of the football in Norman, is there a couple of pieces in the secondary away from being a national championship team. Is Damon Harmon one of those guys? I'm not entirely sure. Based on the conversation that I had with him yesterday, he seems very high on Tennessee and Penn State as well as Oklahoma. I would imagine he's undecided right now. I don't have any insider information that would suggest otherwise, but I'm going to continue to stay in touch with him and kind of gauge his feelings on the 5 schools that he's considering. Another guy that I mentioned already that I'm kind of waiting with bated breath to hear about is Scooby Williams, because Jamar Cain tweeted a picture of Scooby-Doo on Saturday night shortly after, or perhaps it was shortly before, but the night Caleb Williams committed, Jamar Cain tweeted that photo of Scooby-Doo, which Scooby Williams then responded to with a heart emoji. And so that would lead me to believe that Oklahoma is very squarely in the conversation for Scooby Williams' commitment, which would be huge for Oklahoma. And I've talked about this at length, John, is the fact that hailing from Birmingham, Alabama, and the fact that Scooby Williams' other 5 top schools are LSU, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Auburn. That would be a phenomenal ad for Jamar Cain to make a statement that, hey, we can recruit from SEC territory and steal guys from them because we're building something big here in Norman.
Absolutely. That's extremely well said. Mason Smith would be a guy that I think is a really long shot defensive tackle. And you know more, but I'm not telling you anything. He's the number 1 defensive tackle in the country. He's from Louisiana. He's got LSU and 3 other SEC schools listed in his top 5 with Oklahoma. But that would be another one. And Caleb Williams, trust me, is doing his damnedest to go out and say, Mason Smith, you want to win a national championship at Oklahoma with me and Mario Williams and maybe Kamar Wheaton and this fantastic Lincoln Riley offense. We need some defensive horses. If Caleb Williams can pull that off, Lincoln Riley owes him a spot on the staff when his NFL career is finished. If he's that good of a recruiter to go out and but pull somebody out of SEC territory like that, like a Mason Smith, that would be amazing. We're going to get to another topic later on in another podcast, Parker. So put this one in your notebook and kind of marinate on it for a while. OU's virtual recruiting efforts. It's a pandemic. The whole world is shut down. NCAA has declared it a dead period. There's nothing really happening, but yet OU has gotten 8 verbal commitments during the pandemic, during the 2021. So we'll get into that in another podcast and a future podcast. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we're going to hear from Lincoln Riley, who was on a Zoom call with media last week. He hit on a handful of interesting topics, including his reaction when Joe Castiglione asked him to take a not small pay cut. We'll also discuss the upcoming quarterback competition. If you think you know who's going to be the Sooners starting quarterback in 2020, I encourage you to stick around because you're going to want to hear this. All that's next. SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Hey, are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman or a car dealership in Oklahoma City or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise and you just want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Well, then consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. At SI Sooners, we cover all OU sports from football, basketball, and baseball to all the Olympic sports, as well as any big news that comes out of the OU athletic department or from around the Big 12 Conference. To advertise, send an email to allsoonerssi@gmail.com or DM us on Twitter at all_Sooners. Okay, Parker, we got the news in the middle of last week that OU was cutting its athletic department budget by $13.7 million on the upcoming fiscal year. $13.7 million, that's not small. That's a little less than, I think, 10%. If you know, the numbers coming out of USA Today's database every year, the athletic department revenue and expenditures. If you believe those, OU made a shade under $153 million. That was fiscal year 2017, 2018, if I could slow down a little bit. So the data they have is as current as it can be, but it's actually a year behind, and it's certainly behind the coronavirus, 2 years. So these cuts that are coming up, I think they factor in revenue already lost from the NCAA tournament, which the Big 12 told us was going to be around $14 million. And I would think that you better believe they're taking into account all the projections about stadiums being half full. That could get interesting. That's a potentially huge hit, is what that is. And that underscores, to me, what we talked about in the first segment, the desperate need to try to get these games in this fall. But it also factors in, this cost cutting also factors in the new expenses that the school and other OU and other schools are going to have to take on. Additional expenses for COVID-19 testing, upgrading their facilities, for social distancing measures and things like that. Installation of specialized COVID-19 filtration devices, of all things. The extra steps they're taking to sanitize everything constantly. They're OU spending a bunch of money for that. So all this money that they're losing is being factored into all this. It's amazing. One way they're going to try and get there is by cutting the salaries of, really, there's no other way to say this, the most expensive employees. Lincoln Riley, for instance, is number one, makes $6 million a year. Now he's going to be at $5.4 million. Not only that, but this past cycle of Regents meetings, it was just the second time in the last, 15, 18 years that OU coaches did not get a raise. Think about that. So basically everyone who's making $1 million or more is taking a 10% cut. Lon Kruger, Alex Grinch, Joe C., the boss, is having to take a cut. Sherry Cole, Patty Gasso, they all get a 10% reduction in salary. Well, last week on the Zoom call, Lincoln was asked a very thoughtful question, what his thought process was when Joe Castiglione asked him, and he expounded on it with a follow-up question about basically doing his job, which is his job is to make the program successful.
Honestly, it wasn't much of a thought process. Joe stopped by the house and told me what he's thinking, and took me about 2.5 seconds, and I said, I'm good with it. And that was it. It was, we're all having to adjust, and we're all having to, it's unprecedented, and we've all got to do our part, and it's changed things for all of us. So I didn't see any reason why I should be any different. I don't know. I don't see it as much different than my day-to-day job. My day-to-day job is to, oversee and run a program that's very important to the school and very important to the state, and always has been and always will be. And I understand the responsibilities that come with that. And so, in normal years, that's been involved with making this program as successful as we can for a number of reasons. And one of them is certainly the impact that it does have, and both from just an emotional and a pride standpoint, and obviously from a financial standpoint as well. You can talk about all the money that this football program brings in, but you cannot put a dollar amount on the amount of exposure, the advertising, the kind of branding work that does for this university, for Norman, and for the state. I mean, it'd be impossible to put a dollar amount on it. So I know it's important, and I don't know. I guess it's just me. I don't look at it as any different. It's just in this time, it's just like I said, another way that I can do my job. And that's my job, is to make it successful, whatever I've got to do that. And that's why it certainly wasn't a hard decision for me. It honestly didn't feel like, from that, I mean, I know it's a big deal, but from that standpoint, like when Joe asked me, it didn't feel like that big a deal. I mean, it's like, of course I will. So.
Okay, Parker, enough with the coronavirus. Will we have football? Will we not have football? When will the games be played? Why the Big Ten is such a rogue nation bully? Poor Lincoln Riley's second or third beach home. Let's talk actual football, which is to say, you say Spencer Rattler is the quarterback for 2020 and beyond. And by the way, does that line up perfectly with Caleb Williams coming in 2021? You know what? Caleb said he's not coming in to be a backup. Caleb said that's a loser's mentality, so I guess that's cool. It's a good mentality to have if you're a true freshman quarterback. But Parker, I know I've never brought it up before. I'm not saying I buy it now, but I mean, if I take myself back in time and I watch Baker Mayfield throw in that first spring scrimmage, I said right then and there, Baker Mayfield just went 11 of 11 in the spring scrimmage. He's the starting quarterback. Not this year, but next year when he's eligible. When I saw Kyler Murray, I said Kyler Murray's the starting quarterback, not Austin Kendall. And when I saw Jalen Hurts, I said, yeah, it's Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is going to win this job. So I'm not one of those guys that goes out there and toes the company line. However, I will say this, and I have said this and I will still say this. Tanner Mordecai, I think, is going to be a factor in this. The reason I say that, Parker, is I think the more people doubt him, the further he gets backed into a corner, I think the harder he's going to fight. He reminds me a little bit of Baker Mayfield, although I think if you think about it, all three of Lincoln Riley's quarterbacks have had kind of a chip on their shoulder. But he's one of those guys that he's got the ability to play and play well. And Lincoln said it. I think he can win some games at OU. I think Spencer Rattler's more gifted, and I think he's going to win the job, and I think he's going to be the starter for 2 years. But Mordecai, he's not just going to lay down and hand this thing over, Parker.
No, I don't doubt that at all, John. But the reality is you said it, Spencer Rattler is an incredibly gifted quarterback. He was born to throw a football. The arm talent, much like it is with Caleb Williams, is just off the charts. And you're right, Tanner Mordecai is by no means a nobody at the quarterback position. He can play. We've seen it in the limited action that he's got. But he's simply overmatched in this quarterback competition. I don't buy for a minute that it's a competition, right? I don't think it was ever a competition between Kyler Murray and who even was it that Kyler Murray was competing with at
Austin
that point?
Kendall.
It was Austin Kendall, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't buy that it was a competition between Mordecai and Hurts last year. I think it's very, very evident who the better quarterback is between the two, just in terms of their ceiling and their capacity to do all the things that a quarterback has to do in the Lincoln Riley offense to keep Oklahoma in the college football playoff conversation. Spencer Rattler is that guy. And if Spencer Rattler weren't at the University of Oklahoma, if you took Spencer Rattler out of the picture, they'd be in fine hands with Tanner Mordecai. But the reality is, Spencer Rattler is more than likely going to be in the Heisman conversation this coming year. That's how talented he is. I mean, we watched him, John. We watched him this last year. I would watch him in warm-ups with Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts would make a throw 40 yards down the field on a dime. Spencer Rattler, with his Beats headphones on, would make the exact same throw running the wrong direction off his back foot with twice the velocity that Jalen Hurts threw it at. I mean, it's just unbelievable the stuff that he can do with a football in his hands. And it's no disrespect to Tanner Mordecai whatsoever. The guy would probably be in the starting conversation at 90% of other FBS programs. But here at Oklahoma, it's just not in the cards for him.
That's probably a good way of saying it. I will say this also in defense of Tanner Mordecai. He's a year older. He's been in the system for a year longer. He came in, I think it's fair to say that he came in maybe a little bit more mature. Remember Rattler got kicked off the team his senior year in high school. And here's one thing that we absolutely do not know, Parker, and that is who's got a better grasp right now of Lincoln Riley's offense? Who knows the concepts better? Who can read defenses better? Those things, they're kind of intangible, and we as fans, we as media, we as observers, outsiders of the program, we have no idea. So if it's Tanner Mordecai who can do those intangible factors a little bit better, then I don't think Lincoln Riley would really hesitate to name him the starter, knowing that Spencer Rattler still has time to grow into the position. And I'll say it again. I think Rattler's the guy. I think he's going to be the guy. I'm just saying I don't think we should count out Mordecai. We do need to talk about the website real quick before we get going. If you follow OU football, basketball, whatever, and you have not been to SI Sooners yet, what the heck are you waiting for? We've had a shutdown for the last 4 months. No sports. But I mean this when I say it. It has not slowed down Parker. It has not slowed me down. We put out a cool series during the NCAA tournament, during when the NCAA tournament should have been. This day in OU basketball history, we had a different feature every day on a game from that date in OU basketball history throughout their tournament history. That was a lot of fun. We had a series on the top 20 NFL Sooners of the last 20 years, and I'm telling you, I loved putting that thing together. We had interviews with Adrian Peterson, Gerald McCoy, Roy Williams, and others. We're about to wrap up our series on previewing the 2020 football schedule. We're angling all these toward Big 12 Media Days, which is Monday the 20th and Tuesday the 21st of July. So next week, that'll be the last of these things. And we've also finishing up our in-depth look, our series every week on the depth chart. On the depth chart, yeah. I just did the safeties. I just finished the safeties. It's posted now at sisooners.com. It's kind of a nitty-gritty breakdown of every position on the team. So we're also close to, Parker is, concluding his twice-a-week series on what we're calling recruiting ROI, return on investment. Highlights guys over the last 20 years who gave OU fans really the biggest bang for their buck. Guys who were maybe three-star recruits or afterthoughts, forgotten. My favorite example is Trent Williams was the 5th highest-rated offensive lineman in that 2000 and, help me out, Parker, 2006 class, 2007 class?
That's correct.
He was the 5th highest-rated guy who signed on the offensive line for Oklahoma that year. And what does he do? He ends up being a 9-time Pro Bowler in the NFL, 2-time All-American. So I love stories like that. We've got a bunch of them. Parker has just been killing it on the recruiting talks, the recruiting stories, not only OU commits, but a bunch of kids that Sooner coaches are offering scholarships to, including, I love this, some of the 2023 class. I've done some long-form stories on gymnasts and track athletes and softball coaches. SI Sooners, allsooners.com is all you need to know for your Sooner coverage. We have a ton of it. Parker, who's been some of your favorite stories? What's been some of your favorite stories that you've written so far?
Well, I'll tell you what, John. I do regular updates with Jacoby Johnson, who's going to be the top in-state recruit for Oklahoma in both football and basketball when the rankings come out for the 2023 class. He's the son of Malcolm Johnson, who played basketball at TCU and is just a really, really good kid and an outstanding athlete. I think he has a good shot to be at least a 4-star, maybe a 5-star in both football and basketball by the time it's all said and done. He's got a really cool story, really cool background. He grew up in Rush Springs, a town of about 1,000 in rural Oklahoma, moved from Rush Springs to Mustang to play high school football, and after the conclusion of his freshman year, became the youngest in-state skill position player ever to receive an offer from Oklahoma. I check in with him usually every week. Occasionally we'll go a week without chatting, but at least every 2 weeks I'll have an update with him. Really just whatever's going on, whatever's hot in the world of recruiting, I'm on it. Obviously, Damon Harmon announced his commitment date not too long ago, and so the piece that I just did yesterday with him and Kelvin Gilliam, very much relevant and continuing to build the hype for Sooner Nation as we get closer and closer to his commitment. I loved chatting with Nathan Rollins-Kabongi. I'm really excited to cover him in Norman, a very, very well-spoken kid. It looked for all the world like he was going to Stanford when they offered him. OU really, I think if it weren't for NRK's relationship with Jamar Cain, I think he would have gone to Stanford, but he's a guy that's carried a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, wants to pursue a doctorate degree, is just immensely gifted and a really hard worker in all aspects of his life. I tell you what, John, I do a lot of recruiting coverage, and there are some hits, there are some misses, there's some stories that are a lot better than others, but if you stay up to date with us over at SI Sooners, allsooners.com, I guarantee there are plenty more stories like that coming your way. These kids are some of them are just really, really phenomenal people, great football players, but even better people. And that's one of the things that I love more than anything else about the job, is just getting to know these guys, building relationships with them, and learning what they enjoy and what defines them outside of their prowess on the football field.
Absolutely. Well said. And again, if you're an OU fan and you have not been to SI Sooners, the website is allsooners.com. I don't know what you're waiting for. I really don't. The sports world, like I said, may be shut down, but we're putting out new content literally, guys, 3, 4, 5 times a day. So SI Sooners, allsooners.com. And don't forget to find me on YouTube. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. We'll see you guys next time.